Hey guys, Vern Danke, welcome back. Today we are here in Valencia with my friend Dave, and we're going to discuss what it's like to have a child in the latter part of your life. So, welcome Dave, and thank you.
Thanks, Vern. No problem.
Good to see you again. So Dave is a luthier, and Dave was in a couple of the previous videos that I made on how to woodwork without electric.
Mostly, yeah. Mostly don't use electric,
Okay.
except when I have to.
Okay.
I mean, when I'm fixing guitars, sometimes I have to, but in general, I do like hand tools.
Nice. So if you get a chance, check out some of the other videos. I'll post a link. And that's kind of how I come to know Dave, because of the group here, and then he had fixed some of my guitars. But recently, Dave had a child. Now, you were posting on your Facebook that your wife had become pregnant. And I was thinking in my head, I'd never remembered you talking about that you were going to have a child or you wanted a child. So I was thinking, is Dave really going to have a child? I was kind of shocked. I was shocked. And finally, when it came closer and Janet had a belly, I thought, oh my gosh, you're going to have a child. Good for you. Now, where I grew up, where you grew up in the U.S., there's this stereotypical idea that if you miss this window of time or set number of years, that God forbid if you have a kid, that's horrible. You're breaking the code or the law or the morality or whatever. And here it's different.
I think it's a little different, yes. We were talking a little bit before. We got married in the United States. So we lived in the United States together for about 4 years before I retired, and we moved here about 5 years ago. And while there were people there who I'm sure were not excited about our being married, we ultimately met plenty of people who were, and were very supportive. But I never heard any children talk or baby talk. And it was interesting because when we would come to the Philippines for a visit, and we were coming here once a year while we lived in the United States, we'd see Janet's family, we'd tour different cities and different provinces here to check out what we liked. Mm-hmm. Whenever we'd meet somebody, just in traveling, the first thing out of their mouth, I say a Filipino or a Philippine couple, the first thing they'd ask is, do you have any kids? Mm-hmm. And when I would say, no, we don't, are you going to? That was like question one. And this happened dozens of times. And nobody ever asked me that in the U.S.
Right.
Because I suspect they didn't really know the answer. So, they may have accepted that Janet and I were married and we had a nice marriage, but nobody said, well, so you're going to have a bunch of kids? They're like, no, are you kidding? That said, Janet always wanted, we always wanted, and it just didn't happen for a very long time. And I had gotten to the point I thought it wasn't going to happen. Then COVID hit, threw the world into a loop. And then the next year, 2021, I got skin cancer, and for about 6 or 8 months I went through treatments and stuff, and certainly I wasn't thinking about children then. Mm-hmm. Janet still was. And our deal was, when I felt that I was 100% healed, we one more time try. Mm-hmm. And I was more concerned about what's going to happen when we don't get pregnant, and how's my wife going to respond to that.
Right.
And then suddenly in January, she bought 2 tests, and we got the 2 tests, and they were both positive. I was like, oh my God, this is happening.
Wow.
So our child Jack was 1 month old yesterday.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
It is amazing. So, but it is different.
So the people here are more supportive of having a child, and you were getting people asking you, when are you going to have a child? And versus the difference back home, they would see you as having missed that window.
I suppose. I don't, I never asked anybody, but I assumed that they looked at me. I had 2 children with a previous marriage, and I was in my 40s, so I wasn't a kid then.
Okay.
And even then, I got a lot of flack from people saying, oh my God, do you realize how old you're going to be when your child graduates high school and things like that? It was hysterical. I lived in a place in Portland, and there was a convenience store right around the corner that I had gone to hundreds of times. And
Okay.
the first time I went there with my new baby in my arms, the Korean owner of the store said, I can't do a Korean accent, but basically he said, "Your grandchild?" And I yelled at him, "No, he's not my grandchild." God damn it. 4 years later, I had a daughter. Same thing happened. I got my baby daughter in my arms, go around the corner to the store, and the same man, "Oh, granddaughter?" "No, she's not my granddaughter." So I went through all this 25 years ago. And even then, the feeling was in my 40s, I was kind of old to be having children, but I survived that. So at this point, it's so much older that I don't even think anybody, mostly everybody's been very positive and very supportive and very excited.
Nice.
Excited to see pictures of Jack. And whether they think in their minds he's crazy or whatever, it doesn't come through it anymore. But I'm sure if we lived in the United States, it would be a very different experience.
Right. And I've always said that the Philippines is more human. It's just so much more human here. You're allowed to have human choices, have human decisions. You're not micromanaged into this mold. It's just, let's have kids, let's have family, let's have options. You're not like foreseen it in this agenda of anything more than just, let's have family, let's have community, let's come together. And all these things that I think back home are pushing us so much further apart than they're ever bringing us together. And of all the people that I grew up knowing that had families that tried to fit within this window, these kids were all messed up, and they ended up in divorced families. They ended up growing up with parents that were struggling because they barely had enough money. They were pressured to maybe have kids, or maybe they were just sexually active back in the day. And they struggled and they fought to be kids in those horrible environments. And somehow they persevered, and they ended up getting through that. And I see it a little differently. In your case, you're setting your family up to be provided for. You had a good job, you had a pension, you invested, you were responsible. And
sometimes.
Okay.
Most of the time. Okay, not perfect. I know what you mean.
But I see you built a house, you had it set up, you were expecting to have a family.
Yes, and that is true. I mean, and I don't want to get into any morality place. I am married, and certainly you're right. Part of the Philippines culture is you're married, children are supposed to be part of it. It doesn't always happen, but it's supposed to be part of it. So I think when you say the family is so important here, it doesn't have to be that way. You can certainly be single, you can certainly be childless, but certainly there's a great support for people having children. The humorous thing is, after people would meet, friends, relatives would come over here and meet the baby, usually the first or one of the first, "So you're gonna have another?" I'm like, oh my God. Let us enjoy the first. But so there is a real, and I don't pretend to understand the culture here completely by any means, but there is a family orientation and a child orientation that is a little different than our Western countries. Not that people don't love children there, they do, but it is a little different. And so far, everybody's been very excited, and we've been very excited, and it's going well. But it's only 1 month. I'm sure there will be glitches along the way.
But the very fact that people are accepting of children and they want children.
Right.
And I had different Filipinos tell me that when their siblings drop off their kids, they're sad to see the kids leave. And we talked earlier that if you dropped off your child with your family, most often it's like, you're an hour late. Can you come get your kid now? Or where were you? We're waiting for you to come get your kid.
You mean in the U.S.?
Yeah, it's different. They want the kids here. The kids are. Let's just back this up for a second. It's not a perfect society where every family is not completely functional, but yet the kids are loved and accepted and appreciated. They're not looked at as a disadvantage or a mistake or an accident. They're desired.
Yes, and certainly Janet's family has been looking forward to her having a child for a long time, and that's been good and bad because at times she's felt, she's got to say we don't have one.
Right.
So now she's very excited and the family's very excited. Some of them have already been here to visit and to meet the baby.
Nice.
Others are going to come next month. So they're all very excited, and yes, the children are very important here. Again, I don't want to pretend they're not important in the U.S. or in Western countries, but it's different. It is somehow different.
It's different. It's like, if it fits within the script, you're accepted. It just...
Well, here the script is have kids and have another kid, and you'll figure out how to do it.
There you go.
You'll figure out how to afford it even when it doesn't seem affordable. But so far we've had a great experience, the pregnancy and post and now. And it'll be interesting to see how our son grows up in a different environment, and how that compares to having had children in the U.S. They're happy kids too, but it'll be different, I'm sure.
I've never seen happier kids anywhere else than here.
They're very happy here. It's very unusual to confront a child or a teenager who's overtly depressed, miserable, but it happens. I mean, you do see it and you do hear about it, but yes, it seems like most everyone that you meet, most every child you meet is happy and well cared for, or cared for as well as his family can care for him, and I know that's not quite the same.
Right. All right, so one thing Dave mentioned is in the Philippines you can have a helper called a yaya, and Dave mentioned that he has a yaya.
We do. One of Janet's sisters is a professional yaya. She's raised several children already.
Nice.
And so Janet had always had her in mind. It makes a big difference. When I had my children before, there was no help really. We were in our 40s, so I was in my 40s. The wife was like late 30s. So the parents that still existed, the old-fashioned idea of the grandparents will take care of the kids, and we can go out and have a date night, or we can go out and go shopping. Well, that really didn't exist. So there was no family. So other than daycare, which has become ubiquitous in the U.S., we did it all, and that part was difficult and was 24/7. And I worried about that a little bit as we approached this. But so far, having had the yaya has been great. It means there's somebody who can take the baby from Janet or from me, or somebody can help the baby go to sleep, or give him a bottle, or give him a bath, and we can get, even if it's, I remember having children before and just trying to figure out, being alone, how do I get my morning shower, Putting the baby on the floor of the bathroom as I did like a 3-minute shower, now it's not. We have enough help, so there's a real culture here of help, and I don't want to make it sound easy, because I've heard of plenty of people who have had difficulty finding a good yaya. Okay. But if you can, it's very helpful. It's not very expensive. And again, Letitia, that's her name, seems to love Jack as much as we do. She's very happy to help. And so far it's been really good for us. That made, certainly at my age, that was a concern in the past as we talked about having children, because I thought, I still have some energy, but I don't have enough energy to be the 24/7 caretaker, and so we need help, and so we have help, and that's been really good. And for most expats, that's an affordable thing they can do if they have a concern about, I can or I don't wish to do all the childcare myself.
Nice.
So,
Well, that's great. That's great. Nice to have some options.
yes, and you do have options. I mean, obviously, if you're a rich person in the United States, you have that option, but you'd have to be pretty darn rich to be able to afford to have a full-time nursemaid. It's just too expensive otherwise for most people to be able to do. I mean, I guess they did that back in the old days, but you can't afford it now.
Right. My aunt was a nanny, I think, for like the Daytons. So, yeah, it was, but
yeah, I mean,
they had money, right?
We hear about these rich people with the au pairs. I think that's one of the European French terms. But again, you have to be pretty well off to be able to afford that.
Absolutely.
Here, it's not that difficult and it's not that expensive, and so it is something that can work for anybody who's thinking, gee, I'd be into that, but I don't know that we could do all the work.
That's a good point.
You can get work. You can get help.
It's nice to know. So what is just a general range of costs?
We had our baby at Silliman Medical Center, which is one of the bigger, or maybe it's the biggest one here in Dumaguete. It's not necessarily the most expensive one here. It's probably in the middle. So I asked the question of our OB at some point when we were pregnant, whether she had a guesstimate. And her guesstimate at the time was 40 to 50,000 pesos for a normal delivery, and between 100 and 120,000 pesos if there was a C-section.
Wow.
So
that's cheap compared to the U.S.
Janet did not have a C-section, but she did have. Anyway, it ended up being a little bit more than the 50,000 guesstimate. PhilHealth paid not a lot.
Oh, wow.
They paid somewhere between 9,000 and 10,000.
Wow.
So I was out of pocket a little less than 50,000 for the delivery,
which is 1,000 US.
Right. So it was a little less than that. So it wasn't terrible by any means. Again, I'm sure there are hospitals that are more expensive and probably some that are a little less expensive.
Right.
That's probably a middle of the road. And the care at Silliman was excellent.
Excellent. That's good.
The idea, which is true in some Philippines hospitals, that they basically leave you alone and you're on your own, was not at all true. There were nurses and doctors in and out of the room for the couple of days we were there, in the middle of the night, taking temperatures and checking pulses, and Silliman is a teaching hospital, so there were a lot of interns. So suddenly you'd see, 5 people come into the room, and 4 of them, one of them would be the doctor, and there'd be 4 interns, and they'd be asking questions. And so you certainly we did get plenty of attention, and I know that's a concern for some people at some hospitals in the Philippines, that they feel like that they're kind of on their own.
Right.
That wasn't our case here, and the cost wasn't terrible.
Did you have the private room for that cost also?
Yeah.
So yeah, what a deal.
And that was, it's not a luxury room. There was a small second bed for me, which I barely fit on.
Wow.
But I managed for the couple nights. So you're not getting 5-star hotel accommodations, but it's adequate.
Oh, good to know. I didn't know they had that. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
Now they don't, almost all the hospitals in the Philippines do not let the father in the delivery room.
Oh, wow.
So I was not in the delivery room. I was in the room waiting.
Oh my gosh.
And our doctor, called 2 or 3 times to the room to let me know the status. But this is pretty universal. Maybe there's exceptions, but most hospitals will not let not only the father, but any other relative in the delivery room.
Wow.
Remember in the old days, the father was outside pacing and stuff?
Yeah.
It's that way.
Oh,
well, I'm not a pacer. I actually went to sleep.
Oh my gosh.
And about 11:30 at night, the phone rang. I picked it up, and the doctor said, you just had the baby.
Oh my gosh.
So that's true. If you're expecting to To be in the room holding your wife's hand, probably not.
Wow. So you got to have to teach somebody else to do the breathing exercises. With
There was, I asked our OB in advance about that, and she said, well, you can see videos about that, but yes, there's not you're not going to have a coach to work on that. But Janet would seem to be fine.
That's interesting. Wow.
So there are some differences,
okay,
for sure. But we found the care to be excellent. We were very happy with the doctors, the staff, the care level. Was certainly comparable to the 2 children I had in the United States.
Okay. So I guess to sum all this up, Dave, if you grew up in a country with a really narrow script of how your life needed to be and how everything was going to play out with your life, and it didn't turn out that way, and for whatever reason you didn't meet somebody, and later in life you wanted a second chance, and you were that person, what would you say to that person that was considering coming here and hoping to meet somebody? What's the probability of them finding somebody and having a child and having a chance to?
Well, the probability of finding somebody is about 100%. Now, that doesn't mean that 100% are wonderful women. There's always exceptions, but certainly finding someone is not difficult. Whether you, the male, want children that you haven't had, or maybe you had when you were younger in a previous marriage and you're open to the idea of doing it again. Not only can it be done, of course your partner will be jumping at the opportunity, but it can be done here. It absolutely can be done here, and I don't want to, I'm 1 month in, so I'm sure there are going to be plenty of problems along the way, but there'll be the normal problems about raising children. And certainly the financial problems are a little less here as far as raising children, the cost. The help, as I just mentioned, is greater, and certainly the family. I joke with Janet that if we took Jack to my mother-in-law's house and we could drop him off and come back in 6 months, and she'd be happy for us to do that. But you're not going to do that, of course. But there's a lot of people who will be in the family happy to help. And so it can be done, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, most of my core group of friends are 60-somethings who all have one young child. And in most of those cases, that's a later child after they had children earlier in life. So that can be done if somebody wants to, or even if they don't want to, it happens. They're all very happy with those children, and they're very happy that happened, even if whether they planned for it or not. Most of them probably didn't plan it. It just happened as they got married. Sure. So you can do it. You don't have to do it. If you come to here and you don't want to have children, you certainly can find women who will accept that reality as well. But you'll have no problem finding women who would be happy to have children with you, and will be happy to, my wife is really wonderful. She understands that should I say how old I am?
It's up to you.
I'm 69 years old. She understands those limitations, and my back is sore and my knees are sore, and she gets that, and she helps me compensate for that, and we'll say, don't do that because you're going to hurt your back, and so that said, the adrenaline gets charged and I want to grab the baby and go. So anyway, I'm rambling here because I'm very happy with this situation, and it can be done if you want to do it. You don't have to do it, but it certainly can be done if you find yourself, whether deliberately or accidentally, pregnant. So.
Right. So I just am grateful that the people here are receptive to human beings having human beings and loving those human beings, and not making people feel like they made a bad choice. It's like, we have a human being, let's love that person, let's bring them up and let them become a part of our lives. And to me, I think that's the most loving way a people could be or should be. And so I celebrate that.
So I'm not going to even ask you whether you intend to have children in the future.
So I'm 53. And
he's a youngster.
I feel like I
You're
kind
a
of missed the window when I was back there, because I had all these people, they tell me, oh, well, don't do this because you're this age or this age. And I'm like, what? And I look at myself every day. I wake up and I said, what can I do today? What am I going to do today? I don't look at myself as an age, because I feel like that's an excuse to not do something or to put yourself into a box or a window for whatever reason. What am I going to do today? And you maybe encounter a limitation or whatever along the way, but you go forward and you just go forward and you keep moving and you keep going. And to have a child in the future, at some point, I'd still like to have that option. And I don't look at this script from back home anymore. It doesn't matter, because the people here, they want kids, they love kids. And if I could give them that blessing, even if I couldn't be here for the whole time, to them, that wouldn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
That wouldn't matter. They would have absorbed to help bring the kid up and to love that kid. And just to give that child the gift of life, in their eyes and in the kid's eyes, I think is enough. It's enough. And to me, that is the value. And that is the blessing of being here and living in that dynamic. It's
Mm-hmm.
just, it's so amazing. And it's so human. It's just so damn human. And that was what this video was about, to show people what it's like on the other side, and to talk to somebody going through that experience. And it'd be interesting, in maybe a couple years from now, to ask you how that went, and to even dig a little deeper into that.
I'll be haggard by then, but I suspect I'll be pretty happy about it too. I'll be chasing a 2-year-old. Oh my goodness.
Right.
It'll be good.
But you might be teaching him luthier stuff.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely. I will definitely be having him in the shop. I already joke about that. I got my assistant for the future.
Nice. So that's cool. So I'm excited for that, and I really appreciate the opportunity to showcase the human side of life. So thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thank
This
you.
is great. All right.
And we'll see him in the future.